My wife and I met while we were both dating other people. I was in a punk rock band, and she was recently freed from this long relationship with this guy that just didn't appreciate her for her true beauty, both inside and out. She had been on a few dates with one of my roommates and hung out at our party house. We had this amazing house where just friends of ours just came in and out all hours of the night. It just an absolute party house. Long after she stopped dating my roommate, she was still kind of hanging out with us, hanging out with all the folks that just came in and out. She'd had a couple friends that were still part of our crowd, so it just so happened that we started spending many a night just talking to each other, just sitting on the couch long after everybody's kind of faded out and we're still sitting there talking, many times just until the sun came up. We talked about everything, we talked about nothing, but every word of it was just this symphony of thoughts and emotions that just stirred me inside. But there was this one night in particular where I just happened to be giving my son, who was 3 at the time, his evening bath, and I got a phone call. Well, I couldn't leave him alone, and we didn't have a cordless phone. I mean, we were a bunch of broke guys in a band, so my wife generously offered to sit with him while I took my phone call. And she has a story about this moment that she still likes to tell to this day. It was that my son, being 3 years old and all cool and laid back in the bubble bath, and he had his hands behind his head, and he was just, in all his glory there. It was the first time in a while that a woman had sat and given him a bath, so he's calmly and coolly just looks at her and says, "So, what are you doing later?" So my wife says, "Well, I'm going home." And my son says, "Well, you don't have to go home, you could stay here." And my wife says, "I'm afraid you don't have enough beds here. I couldn't sleep here tonight." And my son, without skipping a beat and being the chip off the old block that he is, tells my wife, "Well, you could just sleep with my dad." God, I love that kid. Just thinking back on that conversation still brings tears of laughter to my wife's eyes just to remember that day. I was already in love. I knew that I loved this woman. I just wasn't quite sure how to tell her. Several weeks after that fateful bath, I had spent many a night, many an hour trying to figure out the best way to woo her. And I got this brilliant and cheesy goofball idea that Post-it notes would be the way to her heart. So as she was over quite often, I would start leaving them in inconspicuous places. I would leave one in her purse that would say something like, "I just wanted you to know I can't get you off my mind today." Or I stuck one on the steering wheel of her car that said, "I just want you to know that you're the most beautiful person I've ever met." Or, I would stick one like in her wallet that would say, "Just thinking about you today. Give me a call sometime," or something like that. And it really was cheesy and corny. And but when I talked to her about it today, she'll tell you that was the start. That was the beginning of what we had. I laid the foundation. And it almost became this game for me to see how creative I could get and how goofy of a place I could leave a Post-it note for her to find. And it was only a short time after this that she finally gave in. And instead of me asking her out, she asked me and my son to accompany her family to a company picnic for where her mom worked, to a local amusement park. And oddly enough, being in a punk rock band, at the time, I just happened to have green hair. So I know now you're looking at it and you're seeing, mostly gray hair with patches of what used to be brown, but I had this great big, huge green hair. I had piercings in my ear. I was the lead singer and guitar player in a punk rock band, so that was my persona at the time. And I was absolutely excited yet reluctant to accompany my wife to this picnic because I didn't want to meet any girl's parents looking like the way I did. Especially ones that I was hoping could be future in-laws. But she assured me that her parents were open-minded and wouldn't mind. She just told me I needed to be myself, and so that's what I did. We met them at the park, and I remember the introduction. It went well. It never seemed to bother my mother-in-law at all. I tried to cover it up. I put a do-rag on and a hat and everything, but she could tell. I mean, I've always had big sideburns, so she could tell just by looking at the sideburns. And you know, I eventually took it off and showed her, and it was good for a laugh. And I just tried to. It actually made things easier to be myself that day, and to not be uptight about who I was. I was so worried about my hair, I forgot to do what all guys do and correct our mannerisms and be polite and stuff like that. It was just naturally me, and that got me through the day. So after a while, I'm taking my son on a ride, and my mother-in-law and my wife slip off to have a chat. Being the naturally concerned mother, she asked my wife a bunch of questions about me, my job, my future, my lifestyle, stuff like that. So, and it wasn't long before the conversation obviously turned to my son, who my mother-in-law pretty much admitted she fell instantly in love with him. It didn't take her but a few seconds, and he was just such a charming little kid. You just had no choice. Everybody who ever met him just thought he was the coolest little kid ever. So my mother-in-law asked my wife then if she was going to start dating me, and my wife responded, "Well, Mom, I don't know. He already has a kid." To which my mother-in-law replied with some of the wisest words she ever gave my wife. That was, "Don't worry, you could make more." I think that was the green light that my wife had been looking for. You know, she was probably reluctant to date a guy like me, and in my situation, and was afraid of how what her parents would think of her if she did. But from that moment on, from the time I got off of that ride and met up with her, everything changed. She had used many excuses throughout the past couple weeks to not be exclusively dating me. Not because of really who I was or anything I did, but just simply because I think she thought her parents wouldn't accept my son. But that evening, that night, we shared in the kiss that changed our lives. Not because it was our first kiss, but because it was our first kiss with absolute approval and no more weight on anybody's shoulders, and no more worrying and no more wonder. It was our first kiss where we were actually together. What's odd about it is that it was under the fireworks that the park was putting on that night. So as my son was sitting there in amazement at the colors and the sounds and the explosions, there was another one happening right behind him, and he never knew it the whole time. But that kiss was the mortar and the brick for the foundation of the house that we built together. That shortly after that, we stopped at one of those little mini vendors that was selling those picture frames where you could put your names in them, and we had both of our names, and it has this list of a history behind your first name, and it gives you the meaning behind your name and your compatibility with each other and stuff like that. And we bought one, and it came with the date on it, and pretty much because it had the date on it was the reason that we agreed on that was the memorabilia that we needed for that night. So I took her home, and I decided that before I had walked her to the door, I grabbed a post-it note that was in my car along with a pen and wrote "I love you" on the post-it note and stuck it to the picture that we had purchased. I handed it to her and gave her a kiss goodnight. It was in that day, that whole day, from beginning to end, that my life as I know it today was born. It was born in that day. For it was only a few months later before I asked her to marry me, and it was exactly 1 year to the date of that day at the amusement park that we were married. And I have not spent one day since without realizing how absolutely positively blessed I have been to marry the most beautiful person I've ever met in my entire life. Since then, we've been blessed with a lifetime of gifts, from our 3 sons to our home and my job and what she does, her passions on the side. She's into natural parenting, natural mothering. We've had our kids at home. It's just been, she's opened my eyes to a whole new world that I didn't even know was out there. She has become a second mother to my oldest son, a first mother to my 3 more sons, and she has been and forever will be my best friend.